I have an incredible growth story to talk about today. A growth story like no other. It all started in 2009 when Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp were in Paris. They were under at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower with their hand up in the air, ridiculously shaking it, trying to get a taxi. I know many of you in the room have been there. And they looked at each other and they said, what if I could get a car with the touch of a button? So they went back to San Francisco and initially started Uber as something for their friends. And it started to catch on. And they needed more drivers. And they needed more drivers. And in 2010, Uber was born. And I don't know that either one of them realized at that moment how game-changing this was. Uber was going to change the world, but at that point in time, it was all about transportation, a safer, reliable way to get from point A to point B. But we are changing the way that people get around in the cities. And I want to do a quick poll here. If you take out your cell phone and light it up, I want you to raise it in the air if you've ever taken an Uber before. And do your light so everyone can see you. All right. That's pretty incredible. Look around, everyone. OK, that's 82.5% for those of you that are live streaming. Given we have such a great population here of riders, I don't need to go through the everyday things that you do. But for those of you that haven't taken Uber, Uber is about taking an Uber. You can run errands, get to work, even use Uber to get your kids to soccer practice. And this is changing people's lives. They're actually able to go to parts of their cities they weren't able to go to before. But what I think you don't know, and I want to give you a preview of, is how this is changing people's lives in a more fundamental way. Let me give you a story about a rider situation in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, it's the last place on earth where women are banned to drive. So for a woman in Saudi Arabia, she has to stay home all day and wait for a male relative or spouse, significant other, to drive her around in order to either run errands, go to social gatherings, and just have the ability to meet with people. When Uber launched in Saudi Arabia, we had no idea that we were going to change the social fabric of how Saudi Arabia operates. We were blown away that 70 to 90% of our customer base in Saudi Arabia are women. And it has completely changed what they do during the day. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And I think that gives you a preview of what I mean when I say changing the world. But it's not just about riders. It doesn't stop there. While we empower our riders, we also empower our drivers.
My name is Paul Roybal.
My name is Miles Foster.
My name is Liziani.
My name's Christina, and I drive with Uber because it gives me the time to spend with my son.
I drive with Uber. It really helps me with my English.
And music's a big part of my life, and Uber allows me to keep it that way.
Uber gives me the space to pursue my dreams.
Uber has created economic opportunities in cities around the world. We have over 1 million drivers at this point. This has enabled them to spend more time at home because we have flexible and easy-to-use applications so they can work every day. And can you imagine what it must be like to be able to turn off your job with a touch of a button? Pretty incredible. However, similar to my story about Saudi Arabia, I want to share a similar story about a driver and how moving it is, and how truly life-changing this can be. I want to introduce you to Larry. So, as I sit here and think about what we're doing for our riders and our drivers, there's a whole nother component to this. And this is where it gets into our talent acquisition story. The last piece of our system is about our employees. Uber is all about empowerment. And so as we think about our talent acquisition story, and think about what we had to do, we knew we wanted to embed what was our DNA, which is empowerment, into what we were doing with recruiting to make everyone a recruiter. But there was a business case for this. It wasn't just because we wanted to do this. So I started at Uber 20 months ago. I joined in February of last year, to be clear, and we were in 66 cities and 25 countries. At this point in time, I thought that was mind-blowing. I thought it was incredibly exciting. It felt really, really big at the time. To give you a comparison point, though, of our growth, I spent 4 years at Google prior to coming to Uber, and I looked back to see what was Google's growth in the beginning when they were actually just starting. As you can see here, Google was around 682 employees at the end of year 5. And how that compares to Uber, we were at 605 employees just last year. So I was starting to realize that the growth was like no other. And Google agreed with us. They also said we're the fastest growing company ever. So we needed to develop a people strategy based off this amazing growth strategy. I needed to understand what the business was all about, and why we needed all this people. When I first started, I thought 605 employees was a lot for just an app. I didn't really understand what we were doing. And as we dug in and realized we had so many more cities to go to. In fact, there were more products that we needed to get into. Many of you may or may not know that UberX, or Uber Pop, for those of you that are live streaming internationally, actually only started recently in 2012. We were a black car town service before that. And then more competitors have been in the scene here. And this started to create a pretty scary feeling for me. As we started to look at all of this competition, I was very excited. But the thing about Uber is, if Uber doesn't have a launcher in a city, they can't get riders signed up. They can't get drivers on the road. And they certainly can't get employees. So they have to get the first person there in a city to launch a city. So there was a lot of pressure for us to ensure we had to deliver. On top of that, like many of you and what you've been learning about this week, we also wanted the best people. We wanted every person that we hired to raise the bar. We knew we needed to move quickly, but we also knew that we needed to keep a close eye on this. And as we started down this journey, the press did me no favors. So we had a lot of negative press around different elements you've probably read about in the news. And here I am with this recruiting team and with our hiring managers and just everyone in general in the company, constantly trying to get talking points to help with candidates. It wasn't an easy task. So I knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I got 4 years of training from arguably the #1 best company to work for in the world, Google. And while I was excited, I do have one thing to admit, just to the folks in this room and the folks on live stream. It's a secret, kind of, because I'm usually fearless and courageous, but I will be honest, I was effing terrified. So what did I do? We started to think about what it meant, and we knew we had to build this into our culture, so we had to create a culture of empowerment. How do you go about doing that? We had it in our DNA, but I needed to ensure that it was going to be there in a sustainable way and we could actually grow off of it. So I'm going to share with you 3 cultural tenets that we have at Uber and how that impacts our ability to grow and recruit. The first one is around being an owner, not a renter. What does that mean? It means for us at Uber that you have to be an entrepreneur. Nothing is outside of your job. Everything is your job. We want to ensure that people are focused on the outcome and not bureaucracy or titles or what we have to do to get there. We need to make sure we get things done. And so in order to do that, you kind of have to set people free and ensure they feel like owners. And it's not just about equity. I'm going to give you an example of Stockholm, an example of how this actually played out. So I described a bit the role of a launcher, but just to give you a little bit more clarity on what that is, they're almost like global nomads that we have at Uber that go from city to city, and they do the initial launch. And like I said, they do the initial drivers, they do the initial riders, and they have to sell the Uber brand in places where we aren't, the brand is not very well known. And they hire the general manager, which is a key role for us. So the launchers are already recruiters, and they're already empowered. This story is about Megan Zobak, who's one of our launchers at Uber. So she had to leave Stockholm. She was the launcher, but she needed to find someone to run the business. She got it up and running. So what did she do? Like many of us here, went into LinkedIn, found a contact. That contact told her about a Yelp elite party. I did not know what these were, by the way, before I started putting this together, but a Yelp elite party where the contact said there was going to be a lot of great talent in terms of what Megan was looking for. That gave her another contact to another contact. And by the next day, she had a name of someone named Martin, but he was 2 hours outside of Stockholm, and it was snowing. So Martin, the candidate, gets in the train, comes into Stockholm, two-hour ride, and they meet in a coffee shop where Megan sets up shop and is going to do the assessment process for Uber. So our assessment process, which is also very owner-like, is always a case study. We have a case study for every job at Uber, ops coordinators, every single role in the company, we have a case study. And it's usually a real-life problem that we're solving. And what's interesting about that is that it's relevant, and it makes sense for an owner to have the experience of what it's like to work with someone right next to them with a problem in front of them. So she went through that process. She decided, yes, this is the guy. He's amazing. Hired him on the spot. This is how it worked back 2 years ago. And then they had a problem. The problem is that he didn't have a place to stay in Stockholm, and there weren't a lot of places open. But Megan had to go, visa issues, et cetera. So she offered up her own apartment, the spare bedroom, for him to move in. Now, while I don't condone this as a recruiting practice that your recruiters should do, I think what it does is it represents our culture in terms of what we do to get things done and what we do to ensure that we're doing the right thing and moving things forward. So this is a picture of Megan and Martin and what they're holding up on their fingers, by the way. And by the way, she wrote me an email and said, by the way, in this picture, our minds were totally blown. Because there are 4 cars in Stockholm, they had 3 that were being utilized. That's a 75% utilization rate, and they were going bonkers. They're like, this is amazing, it's really catching on. So it just gives you a feeling for what it's like to go from a very small launch city into something like LA or San Francisco, where we have a lot of supply. The next cultural tenet that I want to share with you today is about making bets. And what does big, bold bets mean? It means risk-taking. It means putting it all out there. And why do we have to take risks now and fast? Why do all of you in your organizations, need to take risk? If you don't, you will be disrupted. And as Uber, being disruptors, we know we have to stay ahead of that. So we have to encourage people to get outside of their job and really, really take risks. So let me give you a second example. We have an amazing team in France, and they were pumped up to get recruiting going. We had real needs. We were wanting to launch other products in France. The team got together and they decided, wouldn't it be great to have a video of what it's like to work at Uber that we could send out? I found out about this, by the way, 2 days after they did this. They sent out a video to 1 million riders on a scrappy budget and had an incredible slate of candidates to go through and to select from. But what's interesting is that this doesn't really happen in a lot of your organizations, I'm sure. Let's take a look at the video, and I'll tell you more about it.
Bonjour, Jean-Christian Gagnon, recruteur chez Uber. Alors Uber, c'est quoi? Uber, c'est faire partie d'un monde meilleur. Avec Uber, personne n'est laissé de côté. Avec
Oui, enfin bon, bref. C'est surtout qu'avec Uber, en 2 clics, vous êtes transporté où vous le souhaitez par un chauffeur sélectionné. Et vous pensez que c'est simple d'organiser du transport de personnes, que ce soit en voiture, en avion ou encore en hélico? Non, il nous faut du monde. Des gens motivés, des gens dédiés. Vous avez déjà pensé à faire livrer des glaces, des chatons ou même votre grand-mère en chauffeur Uber? N'hésitez pas à rejoindre notre équipe marketing, il reste de la place. Et si vous êtes des pros du SAV, on vous veut aussi. Allez Thierry, tu peux dire au revoir à ton bureau tout pourri et à tes stylos recyclés. Nous aussi, on va te chouchouter.
So again, this went out after no approvals, kind of no employment marketing group that needed to look at it. And again, while that might sound terrifying, and I was a little scared, to be honest, after it went out. I hadn't seen the video yet, and I was just like, what's in this video? It just gives you an example of what it's like, though, to set people free and empower them and ensure that everyone's continuing to recruit. The other point I want to make on this, it wasn't the recruiting team in France that made this video. It was the ops team. They were the ones that drove this on a really, really scrappy budget. Then last cultural tenet that I want to share with you today, it's one of my favorites, it's the best idea always wins. So what we do at Uber is we actually ask managers to reach down into their organizations and across their organizations and ensure that everyone is feeling heard and voicing what the best idea is. And so this is critical in an organization to ensure that we're continuing to learn, but also creating an environment where we're seeking out the best idea. So we call ourselves truth seekers, and we want to ensure we truth seek and find that best idea so that we can leverage it across the globe. And since we're disaggregated in so many locations, this is really important. So this example is from my recruiting team in Chicago, our recruiting team. So Andrea Dantley had a great idea. She's our senior recruiting lead. She thought, what would it be like if we were actually able to use our app as a platform to recruit people? So amazingly enough, I don't know how she did this part, she found some engineer who was willing to work with her on this, and they came up with the idea of having interviews on demand. And not just any interviews. They wanted to ensure that they were the right people, so they set up a process of screening, which you can see here. And on the day of the interviews, the people that were selected had the slider lit up that they could have their interview. So they slid it over, and here comes an Uber to pick this person up. I asked Dre, I'm like, well, where are they going? And she's like, well, they just were driving around. We need to do the interview. And I'm like, oh, OK. Makes sense. But usually you get an Uber to go somewhere, right? So they picked this person up. And they're driving around and doing the interview in the car. What's so amazing about this, there's 2 things that are amazing. One, again, is the empowerment piece, and the fact that she did this on her own, was able to kind of make this happen. But the other kind of funnier part of this is our drivers, they wanted to weigh in on the selection decisions. So they would be in the back seat, and the person would get out, and the driver would be like, absolutely not. You guys should not hire that person. That just makes no sense whatsoever. Or he or she would be like, absolutely, that's a great hire. So it was a really fun process and a way to engage our partners as well. And we didn't really know that that would be also something that was part of the experience. So what do we do with the best ideas? We take them, we apply them elsewhere. So what we've done is we actually took this here to Talent Connect. And I apologize for those that are live streaming that you didn't get to experience this week. But for those of you that have Uber on your phones, you may have seen this. We geo-fenced off Anaheim, just this smaller area around the convention center, and we ensured that we had a pop-up that said, welcome to Talent Connect 2015. We've got some folks here. We'd love to talk to you if you're interested. So we actually had people kind of fill this out, and this was our way of doing recruiting all week long through our app, which is pretty incredible. So all of this empowerment, all of this growth, what did this lead us to? How were we able to pull this off with really limited resources? I am amazed and shocked to say, and so proud, that from 605 employees last February, we're at 4,900 employees. It's mind-blowing. And we're actually probably at 100 because this slide was not updated because it's Thursday now. So I'm sure we're at 5,000, another 100. And we're not stopping there. We have more to go. But why do we need all these employees? Why do we need more of this? And why is it so critical that as we scale, we continue to have this sense of empowerment for people in every office around the world? Well, we're developing other products. Uber Eats, for those of you in Los Angeles, this is where it was born. We can get you food in 10 minutes that's hot for lunch. Amazing. So we've re-engineered the supply chain of how to get a food delivery, and we're trying this out. The next product is we realize we don't just need to deliver people or food, we can also deliver things. So Uber Rush, for those of you in New York, you've had Uber Rush for quite some time, is being launched in other cities. So no longer do you have to go to your kids' school if they forgot their lunch, or if your husband forgot his passport and is on the way to the airport. There's different ways that you can actually use Uber Rush, and we've got some really cool stories about that as well, as on how people have leveraged that. In addition to those products, though, it was about more cities. So today we're in 341 cities in 61 countries. And this is, honestly, has been so incredible that we're able to grow this fast. And I reflect back when I started last February, and when I started there were 66 cities. And when we hit 100 cities, we had a celebration, a small celebration in our San Francisco HQ, but all in our offices to celebrate 100 cities. And I kept thinking, oh my God, this is amazing, we've done it. Like, surely it stops here, right? What else can we do? And here we are today. We're going to launch 100 cities in China in the next 12 months alone. Our growth continues to just be staggering. So to sum up, it's all about empowerment. It's about creating a culture where you can have people that are entrepreneurs, able to take risks, and ensuring that they're getting the best idea out. The future. So where are we going if we need more people now? First, more cities, as I just spoke about. And the second piece is new products. So this is a picture actually of a drone that's delivering ice cream in Singapore to the marina on our ice cream day, which we do one day a year, every year, annually. We serve ice cream for 24 hours straight all around the globe. It's pretty incredible. But I had an idea for Jeff, the CEO of LinkedIn. I don't know if he's here, but call this out. I came up with this week, by the way. I think if LinkedIn can start delivering candidates via drones, I'm just saying, think about that, work on it, we'll get back to me, we can collaborate. We have a lot of people to hire. And lastly is new technologies. So like many companies, we're investing in making sure we have better mapping technology, as well as potentially driverless cars. So we have a lot more work to do and more employees to hire. So I challenge you all to think about what empowerment looks like in your organization. What would happen if you set people free and ensured that people felt empowered to recruit and to be a part of the company? Thank you so much.